I wasn't eating foods that should cause hypoglycemia. I was eating fruits, vegetables, whole foods, and lean meats. I quickly learned pull the fruit that has sugar in it. Then pull the bread. I wasn't eating that much bread, but pull all grains, pull all potatoes, anything starchy. I pull for years. But yet, every single birthday party I threw for my kids, I was sitting in the corner shaking and sweating, if not during the party, right after the party. If you've been watching, you know that I take my ingredients very seriously, but there are 3 companies that I have found that I absolutely love. Check the description for discount codes. Hello everyone, welcome to today's solo episode. I'm going to go into a carnivore topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that is, this is something very few people know is the best treatment for a very specific condition. And I've researched this in depth. I cannot find anything else that is as effective as carnivore for this condition. And what is that? Let's get into it. About 12 years ago, I had gastric bypass, and I do a lot of different episodes on this talking about my surgery. Why did I get that surgery? Just a brief overview. I'd been struggling with weight my whole life. I even tried The Biggest Loser. I would have some success, but the weight kept coming back. After The Biggest Loser, I gained 100 pounds, and then I gained more and more, and I topped off around 330 pounds. I ran in Restrict 100 off, and my weight started going up again. It's just this nonstop battle with weight gain. It's not even the weight loss, it's the weight gain. And I knew something was wrong when I was still running and restricting and the weight was continuing to go up. And that's when I reached out for medical help. At the time, I had reached out to Biggest Losers to see other people who had lost their weight and kept it off. And I said, "What you guys doing?" They said gastric bypass. In all my research, it was the most effective way to lose this weight and keep it off, and I was going to be fixed. So I went through all the hoops to get it done. And I remember going through the hoops and them saying, yeah, the worst, obviously every surgery can come with complications, but the worst complication could be something called dumping syndrome. And this would be if you ate something too sugary, it would just dump right through your digestion and you would have diarrhea. That is the extent of what I was told. No one ever told me this other side effect that affects almost every single person who's had gastric bypass, and it can ruin your life. And what is that? Well, I'll tell you, about 6 months after my surgery, out of nowhere, I just started shaking and sweating. I ate some food. Actually, I didn't even know what to do, but I felt really nauseous and I was having food cravings. And so I grabbed some food and I ate it. Up to this point, I had been very, very strict about eating low carb, low calorie foods. I was portioning them out. I was running. I was following the game plan. The game plan also included a lot of protein shakes to get our protein in, since we were having a difficult time getting that food in. And I never felt great after my protein shakes either. Anyway, these episodes kept happening. It kept happening, and they would take me out for days. Like, one low blood sugar would make me want to pass out, and then would extend in for days of just not feeling right and a roller coaster of up and down. I'll never forget the day that when it happens quick. There's no warning symptoms. It's just you feel it, whoomp, it's done. And one day I was driving home and I felt the whoomp. I called my parents. I said, help, help, help. I pulled over. I passed out. They came and got me. By the time they got there, I was coming back, but it was bad. I went to the doctor and they said, you're having low blood sugar. Here are some sugar pills. You need to eat every hour or two or however long. Just keep eating, and that will keep this under control. I quickly learned that was bad advice. Continually eating all of the time, the roller coaster just continued. And those sugar pills, I would come up and feel better for about 5, 10, maybe 30 minutes. And then I dive back down even further on this roller coaster of super highs and super lows of this blood sugar. I could not figure out how to control this. The doctors had no help for me. Their advice was horrible in making me even worse. So I spent the next 10 years of my life completely controlled by this condition. And it was weird because I didn't eat sugar. ever, unless I got this low blood sugar, and then here and there I would eat it if that's all that was around. I wasn't eating foods that should cause hypoglycemia. I was eating fruits, vegetables, whole foods, and lean meats. I quickly learned, pull the fruit that has sugar in it. Then pull the bread. I wasn't eating that much bread, but pull all grains, pull all potatoes, anything starchy. I pull for years. But yet every single birthday party I threw for my kids, I was sitting in the corner shaking and sweating, if not during the party, right after the party. Yet every time we would take a trip, let's say to the mall with all the kids, there was one time the Mall of America, I just had baby Porter, and it was me and my two kids, and I was alone. And in the middle of Mall of America, my blood sugar dropped. This was debilitating. I could not work out. I'll never forget. So for the next 10 years, I cut and I play with foods to try to figure out which food is triggering this. I mean, I basically got down to chicken and green beans, and yet I was still struggling with this hypoglycemia. Eventually, this starts compiling on other illnesses. When your blood sugar is erratic like that, that's a lot of stress on your body. Kind of around the same time, I start getting more chronic fatigue, more autoimmune condition type stuff. Eventually, my autoimmune gets so bad that I decide, as a fluke, to go on the carnivore diet, which means cutting everything except meat, fish, poultry, eggs, dairy, just animal products, and cutting all carbohydrates, and now a zero carbohydrate diet. It was the weirdest thing. Within just a short amount of time, I got off that roller coaster for the first time in my life. And as long as I eat meat without sugary sauces, without, bread and coating on it, my hypoglycemia is completely gone. And this is after 10 years of debilitating roller coasters controlling my life. So I've been carnivore for 2 years. The only times that I have had hypoglycemia, which I think it's been 2 or 3 times, were when I tried something that wasn't meat. So I want to kind of go into that, but I want to go into a few things. I recently joined a Facebook group with thousands of people who are struggling with this. This is a very, very common side effect of bariatric surgery. It can happen to people both in gastric bypass as well as the sleeve, but it's much more common in gastric bypass. And it can happen immediately after the surgery, or it can happen 10 years down the surgery, or it can progressively get worse over time. There's not really much saying when or where this is going to happen. Based on the research I've done, I can give a few reasons now of why this has happened and what the problem is, but I just want to go into really quick another problem with the surgery is we'll never get those nutrients back. We are skipping a portion of our intestine that absorbs our B vitamins and our irons and other things. And if you don't have that area that absorbs it, how are we supposed to get it? So it's such an oxymoron that they told us, yeah, you're going to struggle with this absorption. So here are some oral supplements for you. Yeah, you don't absorb it orally, but oral supplements. Anyway, there's a lot of issues here that I have, and I would never suggest specifically gastric bypass for any single human being on earth. Maybe there's room for the sleeve. I don't know. I think now we have other treatments that are much more effective without all of the side effect, but we'll go into that later. So, the numbers they have in the science is that 10 to 40% of people are struggling with this. But when you talk to people around, just about everyone who has a surgery has some level of this, but there is a spectrum. It also can progress over time. So someone who's fine now isn't fine later. The milder symptoms are this dizziness, sweating, and heart palpitations, and that is very common. The severe cases can cause neurological problems such as confusion, seizures, and loss of consciousness. Now I'm really grateful that we have continuous glucose monitors that can really start documenting what's happening here, but it doesn't really change the fact that you have no warning or notice. It's interesting in the Facebook groups to read people say, my doctor is so surprised how fast it happens to me. And that's not normal. And I'm like, no, that is normal. And I don't understand why these doctors would not know that it's normal for it to happen that fast. There's a few different things going on here. And one of them is the rapid gastric emptying. We're going right from a little tiny pouch and we're skipping about 120 centimeters. It's between 100 and 150, depending on your surgery, centimeters of intestine. You're dumping food deep into your intestine, and it didn't have time to go through that track and through that stomach and get all the stomach acid of the extra stomach that we cut off, and it's being dumped deep, and then the response is an over response of insulin. There's other issues which I'll go into for a second. Let's see here. It seems to become more of an issue after 3 years of surgery. Here's something I read from someone, and I'm going to keep them anonymous, but I feel this exact same way. We were warned about dumping syndrome. We were warned about excess skin. We were warned we may have some nutrient deficiency here and there. We were not warned that we would end up with a completely destroyed life from debilitating reactive hypoglycemia and be desperate every moment of every day just to live a normal life again. I've spent hours and hours researching GLP-1 receptor blocking and anything that might possibly work to help to shift this S show. Usually I can convince myself that eventually it'll get a little better. But today I am utterly exhausted and I am fed up with the constant yo-yos of the hypoglycemia, and I just want it to go away. I wish I could go back and make a different choice. Sorry guys, I'm overwhelmed with utter exhaustion, and I'm totally fed up with the lack of real support from the medical system. I feel the exact same way. I went in doctor after doctor. I even went to endocrinology, and I'll tell you, endocrinology said they absolutely hate this surgery. It destroys your endocrinology system. So I started looking into different ways to treat this because I'm sick of it too. I'm grateful for Carnivore because truly it has made it go away. I go into the Facebook groups and people will say, it didn't work for me. I was eating just meat and then my blood sugar dropped. Well, how long were you eating meat? Because we have glucose stores around our body, and unless you go for a period of time, you still have glucose scores and you're still being affected by things you ate the day before, or even maybe potentially last week. You need to empty those glucose stores. You need to do 0 carbohydrate for an extended period of time to empty that out, become fat adapted, and stop burning glucose, and then you will have relief from that roller coaster. Just a quick thing, an easy, quick way to do this, if you can endure it, would be to fast. Maybe you start with a sardine fast because maybe eating nothing at all, you have the effects of the carbohydrates you had. I guess here's what I would do. I would start out by reducing your carbohydrates, period. Then I would add, if you are still eating some, just so we can get you off this roller coaster a little slower, add fat and protein with your carbohydrates. And then slowly we're going to move towards no carbohydrates. When you fast, you really clear those glucose stores out. I think that's a quicker way to get into it. And it makes it more clear than ever that it is the food that is the problem, and it is the way that your body now handles food that is the problem. I was shocked. One day, my now husband, when we were dating, he took me on a fishing trip and he packed no food. And at that point, I was still convinced that I needed to eat every 2 to 3 hours or I would have this hypoglycemia. And it was the best day of my life. Not eating at all. There was no glucose up or down. I remember there were times in this, I was in absolute desperation to the point that I wanted to give up eating, and I didn't even know what to do anymore because I was just so devastated that every time I ate, my body was not reacting properly, even if I was eating the right things. So anyway, we got to clear those glucose stores out, and Carnivore will get you off that roller coaster. It's hard to believe that it couldn't get anybody off of the roller coaster because it needs to react to something. And meat and fat have a very slow gastric emptying, and they have a very slow glucose response. If you look at the glucose response to meat, it's very slow. Notice I am not saying protein as a general statement. I am saying meat, fish, eggs, and you have to be careful with dairy, honestly. Meat, fish, eggs, poultry, they are slow through our digestion. They're slow insulin response. Some dairy has carbohydrates and some dairy has sugar, so you have to be careful with those ones. But as you're coming off of your roller coaster, dairy can be a great transition, like a cheese, because it's got that added fat and it kind of slows things down. So now I know I'm feeling like, wow, I'm feeling better. And I wonder though, anytime I divert off of this, I'm back to square one. Is there any way that I can fix this so that I can choose to eat the way I eat instead of this being the only way to eat. So I started looking into also with I've also struggled with my weight this whole time. So something is off. Like, not only am I not eating carbohydrates, but I'm still struggling with my weight. And so something like blood sugar regulation is still off. And so I started looking into, can I get my gastric bypass reversed? And maybe that would fix this even better than carnivore. And then maybe I can get my nutrient absorption back. And now I have other tools in my toolbox, like eating just meat is very filling and it's very good for your blood sugar and it's very nourishing. And I have a great exercise regimen and I have other tools in my toolbox. Now that I have those tools, I don't necessarily even need the surgery now that I've figured out another way. So can we have this reversed and will that fix this? Based on my research, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's not going to fix it. Why? Because of two different things. Number one is that this is going to sound tinfoil hatty, but I'm going to link a video in the description that talks about general insulin resistance or diabetes and actual nerve damage in your digestive system. So it's not just that people ate sugar so much that their system got overwhelmed and stopped working. I believe it is actual nerve damage. And so this could happen to anyone. What's causing the nerve damage? I don't know. Is it a medication? Is it seed oils? Is it processed foods? Is it inflammatory foods? Is it chemicals? I don't know. But I believe that type 1, type 2, and this reactive hypoglycemia I'm dealing with are actually a downstream effect of nerve damage. And reversing the surgery does not reverse the nerve damage. And why would nerve damage cause these issues? Because now the correct signaling to our hormones and to our brains are no longer functioning because there's damage in the system. In the video I attached below, he talks about how they have a treatment for this specific area of the digestive system and how by heating that or lasering that area, it causes the body to regenerate that area and reverses insulin resistance. So the reversing the gastric bypass itself might not help, but perhaps there will be a heat procedure like that or a laser procedure like that in the future that could maybe fix it. There's another thing in here that says pancreatic adaptation. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit of the potential benefits of the reversal. It said it's restoring normal stomach anatomy that can reduce that rapid glucose absorption, leading to a more gradual insulin response. That's what I was hoping for. I was thinking, there's two things that happen. Number one, the nerve damage, and then number two would be the dumping deep into the intestine really quickly, and then your body has an overreaction of insulin. So if we add that intestine back, now things can move slower again, and we can slow that glucose absorption down and have a better insulin response. We can have improved nutrient absorption again because we have that intestine back. And it says we overstimulate insulin releases. I don't know. Anyway, here's the limitations. It says persistent beta cell dysfunction. Some patients develop pancreatic hyperfunction, which means an excess insulin secretion over time, which may not fully reverse after surgery. So now your pancreas is just used to overproducing insulin and it doesn't stop even if you reverse the surgery. Possible nerve damage. It's saying the vagal nerve is actually damaged either during the original surgery or, it does say during the original surgery, and this leads to persistent dysregulation of insulin release after the reversal because the vagus nerve is still damaged. And then of course you can have complications, infections, scar tissue, and all that from just having the surgery. They talk about alternatives. So it looks like, and some people have had it reversed. I've been out there asking them, did it help you? Did it not? Some people say that it did a little bit, but they gained all their weight back. Some people said it didn't help at all. It's kind of when I weighed it out with my doctor, and I'm going to continue to kind of interview different surgeons and see if there's an option for me. It seemed like you got to work with what you got at this point. So that is not an option. But thank God I have carnivore, because honestly, I don't live on that roller coaster anymore. And I'm an extreme case that was living on that roller coaster for 10 years. Praise the Lord, I am not on that roller coaster. So if you are still on that roller coaster, please consider a meat-based, animal-based diet and cutting the rest. I want to go into why would green beans and plants and stuff like that, why could that cause the hypoglycemia? I mean, those have like no carbohydrates, so why? My theory is that they are inflammatory. And I know that's going to be foreign to a lot of people, but plants have anti-nutrients, oxalates, lectins, all kinds of things in them, as well as they're sprayed with chemicals. And they actually are inflammatory to a lot of people in our digestive system. I used to have horrible constipation, horrible chronic constipation for years and years and years. I did all the things. I took all the supplements. They kept saying more, more, more vegetables. And I just got more and more clogged up. Not to mention the bubbling of the stomach and the gas. It was so awful. So plants are inflammatory, and that can also affect your hormones. How your hormones function, your adrenals, that affects your body pulling glucose out and using that as energy. Every time my body sees glucose, it overshoots insulin at it. So I think the inflammation from the plants can affect your hormones, which can affect your glucose, which can affect you producing insulin. So in other words, you didn't necessarily eat sugar, but plants actually break down into sugar. But it's the hormone response that gets discombobulated from the inflammation. And cutting them, you just become less inflamed. You're not having all the glucose from the stress, and your body just kind of relaxes, and you can move on with life. Now, let's go into, there are a few medical interventions as far as medication. I'm going to say this wrong, but there's something called acarbose, probably saying it wrong, acarbose. And I asked people what they thought about this. And I think pretty much what it does is slow your digestion down and causes a slower absorption of your sugars and your carbohydrates. But a lot of people reported it can cause them horrible gas. Their stomachs ballooned up and became incredibly hard and painful and bloating, and it was awful. That doesn't seem like a good one. The next one is one I coincidentally also added to my life because theoretically in my mind it made sense. In practice, I'll tell you what happened, and that is I added tirzepatide, which is a GLP and a GIP peptide medication injectable. And why did I think this was going to work? Because it slows your digestion down. Again, this is great. Just like the meat slows your digestion, and that's why that's helping too, the peptide slows your digestion, which allows my body more time to respond to the energy I'm putting into it. That's one way. The second way is it stimulates your hormones to react properly to your food, reducing your insulin resistance. I was never diagnosed with insulin resistance, but we don't actually have a test for that. An A1C is not an insulin resistance test. That is a what have you been eating and how has your body been responding test. But if you've been eating no carbohydrates, now we don't really get to see how your body's responding to carbohydrates because you're no longer eating them. It doesn't mean you're cured. It means that number is no longer going to be high because you basically have gotten rid of that test for your body. Let's see here. What else is there? There's the morning glucose, but again, that can be linked to your diet. So if you're eating a low carbohydrate diet, that number should be lower. Now, in my case, as carnivore went on, that number kept getting higher and higher, as did my A1C. I think it was my A1C was a 5.6, and my morning glucose were pretty consistently 105 and 110, and it seemed like they were going up. What is this an indicator of? That carnivore doesn't heal whatever's causing my insulin resistance. It just doesn't agitate it. Like the engine's still broken. The second I put carbohydrates back in, those numbers are just going to go back up. It's not healing it, because if it were healed, you could eat carbohydrates again. We were told carbohydrates are evil. They are why we are all fat. No, it's because our body isn't processing carbohydrates properly. I know people, my whole in-law family, they can eat carbohydrates and they are a healthy weight with healthy brains, healthy metabolisms, good muscle, good skin, because their bodies are metabolizing the muffins, the noodles, the breads that they eat 90% of their diet. But my body doesn't. The second I eat carbohydrates, it stores them as fat and does not use them as energy. So I'm left without energy and a lot of extra fat. So when you take the GLP-1, you get those hormones communicating again. It doesn't just slow things down, it gets the hormones responding appropriately to your food again. It also reduces inflammation, which helps your metabolism function more properly. So now this is a great tool of slowing things down, helping your body respond to your food more appropriately. But I'll tell you about some of the tests I did for this experiment only, of course, to see if my theory worked that a GLP-1 could cure or be as good of a treatment for this condition as a carnivore. Okay, test number 1 was the Apple Festival this year. It is a seasonal event with local produce, and I've attended this almost my whole life. And ever since having gastric bypass, I have not been able to participate in any of the food at the festival whatsoever. My joy is seeing my family enjoy the food at the festival. But this year, I ate an apple out of an apple pie. And I gave it some time. Usually that would have made me crash pretty immediately. Pretty bad. Made me not feel good. I waited a little bit of time and I waited some more time and nothing happened. So that night I finished that piece of pie that I had grabbed the apples from. So yes, I ate an entire piece of apple pie, and this is coming from a girl who previously could not eat fruit or green beans without having hypoglycemia. But with the GLP-1 on board, and also the rest of my diet is meat and animal fat and eggs. So I have a lot of good glucose maintaining items for the rest of the day. I did not have hypoglycemia at all. Not the next day, and I didn't feel sick. If you know what I'm talking about, if you struggle with this condition, you don't feel great. Like, it's not even just the highs and the lows, it's the not feeling great after you eat it too. And I didn't have that at all. So I was like, that's interesting. But the trauma of this hypoglycemia for years told me that's probably not something you should play with very often, Adrian. It also knocks you out of ketosis and doesn't help you get to your goals. So also, I continued for the rest of the day to have sugar cravings, and I could not satiate them. So I don't like living that way. So I'm having sugar cravings, I'm grazing on food. So I don't really like this. But as far as the experiment goes, it is helping me produce an appropriate amount of insulin to process that food item and move on with my life. Okay, try number 2. I am on a trip with a girlfriend and we're at Ketopalooza and we go out for a beautiful steak dinner. And they put these beautiful, obviously handmade rolls with butter and cinnamon sugar butter on top, and they're glistening on the table with the candlelight. And she doesn't have my issue, so she took a bite of one. And so I ate. I think I ended up eating the whole thing. And it was, I don't know. It wasn't huge, but it wasn't small. It was like a normal size, I guess. No hypoglycemia. But again, so this is a grain. But again, surrounded by, I had an appetizer of shrimp, and then I followed it up with steak. So it's surrounded by meat and fat, but no hypoglycemia. Okay, number 3. Let's see how this goes. I'm on a ship with the 2 crazy ketos, all my keto friends, and my husband. And we go to the ice cream shop, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm cured now that I'm carnivore with the GLP-1. And I tried some sugar-free ice cream. My husband said, only 1 scoop, please. And I was like, are you sure? I'm pretty sure this is going to be like the best day of my life. I'm finally going to get to have ice cream. And I take just a few bites of it and my skin starts burning and tingling. And I'm like, oh no, what is this? This can't be good. I take a couple more bites as we go up to our room. And within a few minutes, I'm shaking and sweating on the floor and think I'm about to die. Like, it was so bad. I brought my continuous glucose monitor and my blood sugar was a 36. Praise the Lord, I had with me my carnivore bar. So if you out there are struggling with this, I highly suggest that you get yourself some honey barbecue, or some apple carnivore bar. It has just like 10 grams of carbohydrates. It's all from like raw honey, and it's surrounded by grass-fed beef tallow and dehydrated or freeze-dried beef. And so you're getting this nice, the way the beef is, you can get that meat in your body and into your bloodstream to slow things down, as well as the fat slow things down, and you can get that right in your system. So it's just a touch of carbohydrate to bring you up, because if I don't eat something, I will stay down and it could get bad. You can have brain damage and the seizures and all the things that pass out. So you got to bring it back up just a touch, not enough that it's going to bring you back down. And then the fat and the protein slow you down. This is something I will put a link in the down there for a discount on these, because I find them to be medicinal. I take them with me everywhere I go now, because there's another reason why you can still have the hypoglycemia that you can't necessarily fully control with carnivore diet, but mostly you can. So I keep these with me at all times in case of a drop, because it brings me up and levels me out. I still, even if you can bring yourself up and level yourself out, it's such a traumatic event to your whole body, to your nervous system, that for days afterwards, you are just traumatized. Like, you don't feel good for days after one of these events. So why didn't the ice cream work? Because even though it was sugar-free or no sugar added, milk has sugar in it, so that was probably there. And then they always seem to put some kind of additives, like often some like high glycemic additives that they don't consider as sugar, even though our body recognizes them as worse than sugar, like tapioca starch. And there's other things, like some of the stevias are kind of glycemic to some people. The maltodextrin that they seem to bind everything to, from our salt to our sweeteners to everything, they put maltodextrin in just about everything, and that is basically corn sugar. So there was something glycemic in it. And ice cream, although starting out solid, once it hits your stomach, it's actually liquid, so it just bypasses right through your stomach. So the other experiments were solid foods, an apple, a grain, even though that's processed. Those things have to stop at your stomach for at least a few minutes before continuing down the digestive tract. And I think with the addition of the GLP-1 slowing things down just a little bit more, those in moderation here and there, not a daily thing, here and there, those seem to be fine. Ooh, I have one more experiment for you. The liquid GLP-1 doesn't help. And that's not really carnivore. It's a bunch of chemicals and additives and basically sugar, even though it's no sugar added. So it didn't work for that. My fourth thing was I ate some Funyuns. Those are basically powdered corn, and because it's powdered corn, it doesn't sit in your stomach long, and corn is sugar. In case you didn't realize, it's very quickly converted in your body to sugar. So it just, again, right through the digestive system, and again, hypoglycemia. So what is the conclusion here? The conclusion is that carnivore is the best treatment to get you off that roller coaster. Period. Point blank, exclamation point. Reversing your surgery can cause even further inflammation, and inflammation is part of the issue here because of your hormones, and your hormones can't function properly with inflammation. So reversing the surgery between the inflammation causing you issues and then the possibility of your pancreas is now just a hyperinsulin responder and producer, and then the addition of the vagal nerve damage that it doesn't fix, maybe even makes worse. As they're in there, maybe they make that nerve damage worse. Reversing the surgery isn't the best route, and it is a horrible gamble that I think the odds are not very good. And then the GLP-1 seems to help, but it is not as, like, if you're going to eat carbohydrates every day, I think you're still going to be playing around with roller coasters, especially if they are liquid. So, but a solid carbohydrate here and there, I think with the addition of the GLP, I think is going to be okay. So for example, let's say down the line, I get to my weight loss goal and I decide I would like to add some strawberries. I think I'm probably going to be fine as long as I surround that strawberry with some animal fat and meat to kind of slow down, as well as that as a solid. So in the end today, what I'm here to tell you is if you're struggling with reactive hypoglycemia, you need to try some fasting and trying slowing down those carbohydrates, clear out those glucose stores, and go on a zero carb diet. It depends on how extreme your case is. And I think that the cases only seem to get worse and worse over time because I think it is damage. And I think the sooner that you stop getting your pancreas to overproduce insulin, the better. Because, like I said, you can turn your pancreas into a hyperinsulin responder. So, the sooner you lower your carbohydrates as close to zero as possible, probably the better off you are down the line. If you have any questions or comments about what I've said today, because I know some of the things I've said have been very controversial, please put them below. If you are considering adding a GLP-1 to your lifestyle of eating meat and lifting heavy things, please join our Facebook group. It is called Eat Meat, Lift Heavy GLP group. And if you need any one-on-one support, I will put my calendar down below. I will happily share my experience, strength, and hope with you in any way I can to help you feel your best, to getting you feeling better. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.